I'd like to hand over to our presenter, Chris. Chris, are you there?
Yes, thank you very much, Karim, and thank you very much for the introduction and also always handling these Toolbox Talks for us in the morning. We just want to let all of our IOPSA plumbing members remember about the Plumbing Industry Awards happening on the 28th of July. That's next month at the Royal Elephant Hotel and Conference Center at 6 p.m. So please, if you haven't made any arrangements yet, please contact marketing@iopsa.org in order to book your seat there. And then the tips to continually prevent COVID-19. In fact, as we've mentioned before, it doesn't only prevent COVID-19, but other illnesses that are born out of dirty areas, dirty hands, unwashed hands, specifically in plumbing, where you are working in areas that perhaps haven't been cleaned for a while, working with plumbing, biological agents, things like that. So please continue to wash your hands regularly, even if it's not for COVID, but for other illnesses. If this is not available, perhaps still keep that alcohol-based hand sanitizer with you. They're a lot cheaper now than they used to be. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Adhere to your social distancing if somebody is sick, and then cover your cough or sneeze with a flexed elbow or tissue and throw this into the bin. And please remember something very important. This is part of housekeeping, cleaning and disinfecting our frequently touched objects and surfaces. And we mention this often, specifically when it comes to the tools that we use, even the PPE that we are using. Keeping our PPE in good, clean condition will go a long way in keeping them for a longer time. Obviously, they're not going to get damaged as often, and they are going to protect us the way it's meant to do. But our tools, this is something that we often are not cleaning. And so we ask you to please continue to do that. If there is a possibility, take some time out and make sure that our tools and things that we are working with, our equipment, always remains clean. This would also then go largely into maintaining our tools. So having a good maintenance routine, also very vital for ensuring the safe use of our tools. So this morning we are looking at DSTI and PTO, or daily safe task instructions and planned task observations. This is all part of continuous risk assessment. So we are going to be touching on a little bit again in the working at heights area, because that is one of the main areas that we've been concentrating on in these past 2 months. But the DSTI and planned task observation will actually work for any task. So it doesn't really matter what task you are performing. Continuous-based risk management happens for every single task, but priority is always taken on high-risk tasks, or what we call critical tasks. These are areas where the rating of risk, or let's say the percentage of risk, is a lot higher than other tasks. And we know that when it comes to plumbing, some of your highest risks, working in confined spaces, working at heights, and then also working with dangerous tools. For many of you working in confined spaces or even trenches and excavations, these would all form part of your high risk or critical task areas. And so when performing specific sites or tasks on specific sites, we always want to give priority to these tasks. Now, when we talk about a daily safe task instruction, this is generally in the construction industry. For most sites or clients, they're going to ask you for this, but I've started seeing them creep into the corporate areas. Now, why does this happen? Was the daily safe task instruction only designed for construction? No. It was brought into construction because that's a higher risk area. Remember, as we said, tasks that are higher risk or more critical is where we give priority. So yes, the health and safety objective was there to keep everyone safe, but the priority was really given to mines, first of all. Then it started coming through into our construction. That's why the new construction regulations were given out. And now that it's happening in construction and we can see the benefits of it, it will then start to become more and more required and necessary in other industries, such as in just basic maintenance for corporate clients. So if you are in an office and you're working behind a desk from your PC, like I do very often, I don't have to do a daily safe task instruction every day. But there might be parts of my job where I have to go to site and perform a fall protection plan, and it requires me to go and check how the ladders are set up, how scaffolding is set up, perhaps even get on the roof to take a look to see if there are lifelines. Well, then in that instance, a daily safe task instruction would be necessary, because although I'm not working at heights, I still have to climb up there. There's still a chance of me falling down. And so I'm not on a construction site, I'm at a bank, but it's still a roof. it's still something that I could climb up to and fall 30 floors down. This is a high risk area. And so you can see why it is still necessary, even though we are not in construction, how it's starting to now be replaced in most other areas. So that is why we are discussing DSTIs and planned task observations, purely because as plumbers, you will start seeing it. Now, we don't want you to be fighting on site, and we mention this very often. Please don't fight with the safety officers on site. If there is a problem, get in touch with me. I give you free consulting. If you have a question, email me. I'll email you back based on that question. And if there's something I can help you with, perhaps a template or something like that, I will then definitely do that for you. And this is the offering that we give to all IOPSA members. But I want to extend that to any person out there. Even if you're not an IOPSA member, please get in touch with us, because if there is a way we can help you, and it just means us sending you an email or a WhatsApp back with the information that you need, then let's do that, because that helps keep you safer on site. And we are not going to charge you for that. So please get in touch when you have questions like this. We really want it to become an interactive program or an interactive relationship that we have with you plumbers out there. And if you're not a plumber, perhaps you're listening in a different industry, regardless of the industry that you're in, please also reach out to us. So the DSTI, as we said, is going to start coming into other areas of your work. So when you go to your bigger corporate, you'll start seeing DSTIs coming in. Now, DSTI is what we call a daily safe task instruction. And it's in the name. It must be done daily. It's a safe task instruction. So this is part of your Occupational Health and Safety Act, Section 8, where it says that employers must identify what the risks and hazards are that are attached to the working environment. So what are the risks? And then provide supervision, training, instruction, as well as any other resources needed to keep you safe. So this is part of the instruction phase on risks and continuous management of risks. So that's really what a DSTI is. A planned task observation, very similar, but that's just handled by a different person because it's not done daily. So a DSTI done daily on site before you start working. The objective is to, first of all, identify the hazard associated with that task being performed on that day. Now, it helps employees who are filling in that DSTI. So just as a hint, please, who is supposed to fill this out? Well, all employees must have some sort of hand or finger in actually filling in this document. So please include all the employees who are performing that task. And it helps them to understand the immediate dangers to their health and safety. Now, most DSTIs, in fact, I haven't come across one yet that hasn't been like this. So I could almost say that all DSTIs, but I'm not going to say that yet because I don't know what's happening in the other spaces. But all the DSTIs we have worked with has to be signed off by both the contractor as well as the principal contractor's responsible person for safety. So on construction, you'll have the safety officer appointed for the contractor, such as the plumbing contractor. They will fill it out with the team on site. Before they can start working, they need to go over to the safety officer. The safety officer will then read through it and see if they've covered all the risks and hazards. They will then sign it off, and that will almost become like a permit to say you are now allowed to work for that specific task. And what that does is it gives a double or triple check system. Your employees are then checking what they are doing for the day, and they know and understand this is what's going to hurt me today. Then the responsible person over those employees, the safety officer, safety responsible person, or even the team leader who's appointed in a health and safety position, is now also explaining what is to be done safely while performing that task. And then to sign it off and to give that third stamp of approval, the safety officer of the principal contractor or even the client, depending on where you are, they will then sign it off and maybe even check and see if you perhaps checked all the risks of that specific task and maybe give you a little bit of advice. And if they have the time, they might even come to the site with you and check on the task that is being performed. So that is why a DSTI is there, or what a DSTI really is. So you can see the logic in it. and you can see the necessity for it, specifically looking at high risk areas. Now, why is that? Well, the reason for that is there are so many types of risk-based management systems out there that they tend to get complicated. So a DSTI is a very simple document to fill out, very similar to the planned task observation. So the planned task observation is performed weekly by a supervisor or manager. As the name says, you plan to observe a task. So perhaps out of the 5 days you are working in the week, you've got 5 DSTIs. And on the one day, let's say today, Tuesday, you are doing a different type of task. Your supervisor or manager must choose to come and observe you performing that task. Now, what is that supervisor doing? Well, it's designed to see if the employees are actually working in accordance with your safe working procedures, safe operating procedures, method statements, risk assessments, basically the safety content of the file. If that task is covered, is it in the risk assessment? And do you have a daily safe task instruction? Basically, this entire observation form, which is a 1-pager, it can be 2 or 3, depending on the type of task you're performing. But it's to identify if there's a system that needs to be strengthened. So in other words, there might be a deviation somewhere. And we're not talking about blaming a person. We're saying when you start up and the manager or supervisor observes you filling in a daily safe task instruction, they notice perhaps that the employees are writing down risks that are not really risks, or hazards that are not really risks, and the understanding of what is the difference between a hazard and a risk. Maybe they see that training is required. Now, we're not talking about formal training. We're not talking about you throwing money at the problem and sending them now to an accredited service provider to go and get higher training. That's not what we are asking. It's not a requirement of them to have that type of training. But what it is required is for them to get in-house knowledge of their task that they're performing and the risks and hazards associated with that. So the basic fundamentals of what is a hazard and a risk can be done in-house. Now, if those deviations are noted on the planned task observation, it helps that supervisor or manager to understand what the employee's mindset is, and then how they are approaching that to their task. And perhaps if we change the mindset, the task will then change. So often what happens is we write down steps on a method statement of how it must be done. And when we get to site, that's not actually how the task is being done. So that brings us to the next question. Why are these 2 documents then actually needed? Well, for one, the reason for either of these documents is to ensure continual risk management. Now, that is the basic fundamental need for any person on site. You want to check that your risks are being managed. Nobody must get injured on site. You want a quality service and quality product to be installed. And then you want to leave site safely. You want to leave the site in a clean manner, and you want to leave with a good reputation for the client. And what that helps is to build the rest of your business, because more people will talk about what a good service provider you are. And sometimes, and you've heard it said, clients pay for what they get. I know a lot of plumbers say that, and I've seen a lot on social media where you see a very bad plumbing and you say, well, that's what you get when you choose a cheap plumber. And then you have, on the other hand, a lot of companies that say, well, some plumbers are way too expensive. And we say the same thing, well, you pay for what you get. But are they really paying for what they get? Think about, if you are a cheaper plumber in the area, does that mean your safety has to suffer? No, it doesn't. If you're a very expensive plumber in the industry, does that mean your safety has to cost you a pretty penny? No, it doesn't. Safety is basically there for any company, regardless of the size or how much money you make, because it really is reliant on the employer and the employees. If you have one employee, one employer, well, both of them have a responsibility, and they can uphold the entire safety management system, all by mitigating and managing risk on site. So yes, you might have a larger file for a larger company, but really it's duplications across the board of each individual scope of work, because it's the same thing. It's managing risk, just in different ways. Now, since a risk assessment is done before you've even started working, that's generally put into the safety file, a baseline risk assessment or an issue-based risk assessment. That's for the entire project. The continuous risk mitigation is necessary to ensure that the work is done without harm to employees. Now, if you're on a project for 2 months and you've signed the risk assessment and it only is reviewed 3 monthly, then you don't listen to that risk assessment for the next 2 months. In fact, that whole project of 2 months that you're working on, you are not going to listen to a risk assessment again. So after a few weeks, you're going to realize that you're just going to continue on with the job and forget about what you read in the beginning of the safety file. In fact, did you even read the risk assessment in the safety file, or did you just have to sign it in order to get the safety file passed? Well, if that's the case, then you actually don't know about the risks and hazards on the site. All you know is the risks and hazards of your own specific job. Because you do it every day, you kind of know what's going to hurt you, but you don't know the site-specific risks. So the DSTI helps to identify what will harm the employee on that particular day for that exact task. And it gives you a reminder of the risks, as well as how to protect themselves. So it's a double check, it's a double training session. It keeps the mindset and focus for the day on risk management. So not just a safety file that was signed at the beginning of a project and then never looked at again for the entire project. This is something done daily, signed off by the responsible persons, and it is part of training, part of instruction, part of continual risk management. So you can really see the benefit of it. Now you think, wow, that takes way too much time. Well, it doesn't actually take too much time. If you've done a risk assessment before and you've done a DSTI before, you can see the time frame is widely different. Now, perhaps doing a daily safe task instruction is going to take you relatively quick, but a planned task observation will take you a little bit longer. Why is that? Well, Section 8 of the OSHAC states that employers are to ensure good supervision of their employees. So there should be a procedure in place to report back what is happening in terms of occupational health and safety on the site. This planned task observation gives a good report, and this helps supervisors and managers to give a report back either to the safety committee, if there's a safety committee established, or directly to the employer. And this is designed by writing out exactly what is happening on site and noticing your strengths and your weaknesses, and then giving your suggestions on what you can do to prevent it from becoming an injury or an accident. So how are these documents designed? Well, they're designed as templates, as we've mentioned. They are template formats. They are blank. You've still got to fill them in. And that's the whole reason why it's good for training, as well as continual focus on risk management for your team, because they are involved in actually completing the document. The responsible person, whichever that person is that's appointed to fill it in, will then complete it for the day, if it's a DSTI, or the week, if they are a supervisor or manager. Once completed, please remember it does form part of your overall risk management structure. So it needs to be verified and it must be reviewed. It is either going to be verified and reviewed by the OHS committee. So once you fill them in, maybe for the project, keep copies of these, give it to the health and safety committee. If there's no committee, give it to the health and safety representative. Otherwise, give it straight to the employer so that they can read and understand what is actually happening on site. Then all of this is going to be then reported from the OHS committee or OHS representative. All of this information can then be designed into a report for the CEO or the owner of the company to then also see exactly what is happening daily in terms of health and safety. This report might only be given to them every month, so they're not going to get a daily report, but when the committee meets, they will then discuss these types of documents. Sometimes committees are only meeting every 3 months. So that's the minimum requirement. Every 3 months is when an OHS committee should meet. So you might only get a report every 3 months. If there are higher risks, as we mentioned, the higher the risk, the more the priority. So when we set up committees, we take a look at the risk and then we say, well, the minimum is 3 months, but you're at a higher risk, it has to be done monthly. And then they start implementing a monthly one. You might even be requested to do a weekly committee meeting on a site. Why is that? Because the risk has been assessed as critical, as catastrophic. In other words, you've got a very high risk of multiple fatalities. And so you need to meet a lot more often. So we're not chopping and changing our minds. This is all based on risk and risk assessment. Then please remember all documents must be kept with the main safety file for the project. And obviously all of these documents are always kept for a period of 3 years. Now we've answered this question, but we're going to answer it again. Who must be involved in these documents? As many employees as possible. Remember, the more employees you have involved, the better their understanding will be of what is needed and what should be done to execute a safe process. Now, sometimes we don't do the actual work. I know for myself as a safety consultant, I don't perform the actual plumbing. And that's why I try and get out to site as much as possible to see the installation of certain plumbing. Now, I can't be involved in it. Obviously, there's other issues there, but I need to watch how it's done. But I've never done it myself. So it's necessary for me to actually speak to the person who performs the task to see how it is actually done and then see if that is the safe method. In other words, I've designed a safe work procedure. I've filled in the DSTI. I'm looking at the job observation, but what is said in the method statement is not being done on site. Well, that's obviously an issue. It doesn't mean what's being done on site is wrong. It may just mean that our method statement is incorrect. So we need to adjust the method statement to, make sure that it matches up what's actually being done. But if there is a problem with what's being done on site, perhaps a step is being skipped or a safety procedure is being overlooked, well, then retraining, reinduction is needed. So that is the requirement of how many people are involved. The entire company should actually be involved in these types of documents. So let's look at the templates that we have designed for you. And please remember, they are in Word documents, so they can be made more specific for you. So let's take a look, first of all, at your daily safe task instruction. Here you've got a daily safe task instruction. It's a checklist on the one page before work commences and a checklist for at the end of a shift. Now, DSTIs range in complexity, so there's many different types of risk assessments out there. I'm giving you this one as a template and I'm designing different ones, or I'm receiving different ones from different clients or different sites. And as soon as I get it into Word document, then I edit it and I'm going to put it on our website for you under templates as well. And we're busy working on that page now. It's a whole page dedicated to templates, which is going to be on our website probably in the next month. Then you can just go and literally download it from the website and have access to all these templates. But when you get them, it's going to be in Word document. You'll notice under the description, it's asking you a few questions. Is there safe access to the area? Is it clean and tidy? Is there sufficient and correct ladders? Now, if you're not using a ladder, well, then take that out. Perhaps you're working with a scaffold. So you want to remove sufficient correct ladders and replace it with sufficient correct scaffolding. So we don't necessarily want to have a no column, but it's there because if you are working with a scaffold, but it isn't safe, we want to have the no. All right, so we must still keep it there, but we don't want the no to become not applicable. So we really don't want anything on here to be not applicable. Remember, this is for high-risk tasks, so we want to make it specific. Now, if you're listening in and perhaps you're an electrician and not a plumber, you will then start off with, do you have isolation in place of the energy source? Is there a lockout, tag out in place? Do you have a permit to work on it? So there's your first 3 questions already on there. And if any of those are no, well, then you can't start working for the day. So you'd want to make sure that your task that you're going to perform, your DSTI is kind of matching that task. You don't want to have one that's exactly like this for an electrician, perhaps even a plumber, because it doesn't cover everything for all of your tasks. So what we're saying is don't be lazy. Don't take one document and say, well, this document is now going to fulfill my entire management system for risk, and I can use it on every single site for every task. What we are saying is it's a template, use it, but change it according to the task so that when you are checking those descriptive things, you are actually seeing all the critical controls that should be in place to protect your employees. Then if you do say no, what is your corrective measure? And give yourself a due date. Most of the time, it's immediately that it needs to be done. But if it's a no and you're not going to perform that task and you're going to move on, don't throw that document away. Please still keep it, because the Health and Safety Committee, supervisors, managers, you need to be aware of this. Why did that task stop for the day? It might be verbally instructed to you. You might get a phone call and say, we're not allowed to work today. But keeping the document will give you a reminder 3 months down the line when you're sitting again in a committee meeting, and then say, we actually haven't done anything about this, because time gets away from us. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months. Before you know it, we're in 2022, 2 years after COVID, and the time has flown past. So don't allow yourself to be taken about just verbal instructions. Keep the documentation. Then you will notice it gives you the risk assessment reference number. So your basic risk assessment that you have for that site. What is your list of your main steps for your task for the current job? What are the hazards for the job and the environment? And then what are the controls needed? And you can see then there's a few blocks to fill it in. And we're just looking for the main items. We don't want to make it too intricate, but we want to give the main sections of what is actually happening. Current job, setting up a ladder for the ceiling. What is your risk? Well, first of all, it's working on the ladder, so it's working at height, so you're going to fall. Then working inside the ceiling, you might not have adequate lighting. You might not have adequate ventilation, might be dusty up there. You might have exposure to electronic or electric cables. There's so many hazards. So that is why it's so necessary to have a DSTI like this. Then you'll notice 2 people can sign at the bottom, responsible person, supervisor or foreman, as well as the safety officer for the client. If there's no client, you can just have the team leader and somebody else sign, maybe as an employee. The DST closeout, now you're going to start asking questions to check whether you can close out the site. You know, are you tools and is it clean? Housekeeping done? Permits signed off? Has the area been closed off? Has it been clean? Has housekeeping been done? Has material been neatly stacked? Tools packed away, etc. So you can see the simplicity of this type of document. There's a simplistic plan, task, observation as well. Who's doing the observation? Who are you observing? What is the job that you're observing? And then, have you noticed any deviations? Which means you must know the risk assessment. You must know the method statement. You must know the job. We don't want to appoint a supervisor over employees that are not competent. What are the reasons for deviations? So give a system that's in place that should be done, that is not in place, that can be fixed. What is your recommended action for ensuring that it is done safely? And then the follow-up review is generally done by your safety committee or your CEO. Then you sign it at the bottom, and that must be actioned. All right, so these are reports. It helps us to see what is happening actually on site. So what should you do now? Number 1, you need to ensure you've got all the documents for your site. Number 2, print extras in case. Have a training session for how to complete these documents, and then do a practice session while you're doing training. Work as a team when you're on site. Please don't sit in the bucky and fill these documents out. Communicate with each other and get the perspective of what is going to harm you. Find ways to keep safe while you're on site. Stick to the safety procedures and then continually do this, and you will continue to succeed in your safety system. Now, as we mentioned, those templates will be coming to you on the OHSS website in the next month. So I'd say by the end of this month, you'll have access to that, and we'll send out a message to you. Next week, we're looking at risk assessments, and please don't forget the safety thought. If you have these documents, take 5 and stay alive. Thank you very much, Karim.
Thank you very much, Chris, for this informative session. We do have a quick question. The form, is it downloadable on your website? Just to confirm.
Yes, it's going to be uploaded. So we're busy uploading them during this week. So I'd say by the end of this week, we should have a lot of documents. In fact, in the next day or 2, we will have the 3 documents that we've spoken about, but we are planning to put a lot more documents on there. So if you just go to our website, scroll down, and you'll see it says templates, and you can just click on that to that page, and you can go and download as many as you want.